The sun hung low over the quiet town of Pine Ridge, casting long shadows across the streets and fields. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The air smelled faintly of pine trees and freshly cut grass, and the only sounds came from birds chirping in the distance and the occasional rumble of a tractor on the outskirts of town. For most people, it was just another ordinary day. Ethan Cole stepped out of his car and looked around. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his sharp features gave him an air of calm confidence. He wore a simple leather jacket over a plain white shirt, blending in perfectly with the locals. But Ethan wasn't from around here. In fact, he wasn't even human. To anyone watching, he might have seemed like just another traveler passing through, but beneath his calm exterior lay centuries of knowledge and experience. A few miles away, Rachel Meyer walked along the edge of the forest. She had arrived earlier that morning, carrying nothing but a small backpack. Her blonde hair was tied back into a loose ponytail, and her green eyes scanned the surroundings with quiet intensity. Like Ethan, she wasn't who she appeared to be. Both of them were Valens, members of an advanced alien species sent to Earth on a mission. Their goal was simple: observe humanity and uncover why humans were the only intelligent beings in the galaxy who hunted apex predators. The Valens had spent millennia studying other civilizations, but none of them shared humanity's peculiar behavior. Most intelligent species avoided conflict whenever possible, preferring to live peacefully rather than risk their lives chasing dangerous creatures. Humans, however, did the opposite. They sought out predators, lions, bears, sharks, and hunted them for sport, trophies, or survival. The Valens found this trait both fascinating and unsettling. What drove humans to take such risks? Was it bravery, arrogance, or something else entirely? Ethan adjusted the collar of his jacket and glanced toward the woods. Something about this area felt different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but there was a strange energy in the air, almost like static electricity. It made his skin tingle, and he wondered if Rachel had noticed it too. Pulling a small device from his pocket, he activated it discreetly. The screen lit up with streams of data, analyzing the environment around him. Whatever was causing the sensation, it was close. Rachel, meanwhile, had already ventured deeper into the forest. She moved silently, her footsteps barely disturbing the fallen leaves beneath her boots. Her instincts told her that something important lay hidden here, buried under layers of earth and time. As she reached a clearing, she paused and knelt down, brushing away dirt from a patch of ground. Beneath her fingers, she felt the rough texture of stone, not natural rock, but something carved by intelligent hands. Her heart raced as she realized what it might be, an artifact left behind by an ancient civilization. Back in town, Sheriff Daniel Hayes sat in his office, sipping coffee and flipping through a stack of papers. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a weathered face that hinted at years of hard work. His badge gleamed against his chest, a symbol of authority in a place where crime rarely happened. Today, though, something felt off. Calls had been coming in all morning, strange noises. In the woods, livestock acting strangely, lights flickering in homes. None of it added up, and Daniel didn't like mysteries. "Hey, Daniel," called a voice from the doorway. Clara Bennett stood there, holding a clipboard and looking slightly out of breath. She was a wildlife biologist who often worked with the sheriff's department when animal-related issues arose. With her curly brown hair tied back and her practical hiking boots, she looked every bit the part of someone who spent most of her time outdoors. "What's going on?" Daniel asked, leaning back in his chair. "You've got that look." Clara hesitated. "I'm not sure yet. I've been getting reports of unusual animal behavior, dear, wandering into yards, coyotes acting aggressive. And then there's this." She handed him a photograph taken by one of the residents. It showed a blurry image of something glowing in the sky above the forest. Daniel frowned. "Could be anything, a drone maybe, or some kids messing around?" "I don't think so," Clara replied. "There's more. People are saying they've seen shapes moving in the trees. Not animals. Something bigger." Daniel sighed and stood up. "All right, let's go check it out. Better safe than sorry." As they drove toward the forest, neither of them noticed the figure watching from a distance. Ethan stood partially concealed behind a tree, observing their movements. He had seen enough to know that the artifact Rachel had discovered was affecting the environment. Animals were growing restless, electronics were malfunctioned, fur disrupted, and now the humans were investigating. This was dangerous territory. If they found the artifact or worse, figured out what it was, the mission could be compromised. Rachel emerged from the woods moments later, her expression grim. "We need to leave," she said firmly. "This is escalating faster than we anticipated." Ethan shook his head. "No, this is exactly why we're here. Humanity's response to this situation will tell us everything we need to know." "You're letting your curiosity get the better of you," Rachel snapped. "Do you realize what's at stake?" "If they find us, they won't," Ethan interrupted. "Not if we stay careful." Before Rachel could argue further, a loud crash echoed through the forest. Both turned toward the sound, their senses on high alert. Somewhere nearby, branches snapped and voices shouted. Daniel and Clara had arrived. Peering through the dense foliage, Ethan watched as the two humans examined the area. They were cautious, methodical, and clearly determined to uncover the source of the disturbances. Ethan felt a pang of admiration. These humans weren't backing down even when faced with the unknown. It was a quality he'd observed before but never fully understood. Rachel tapped his shoulder urgently. "They're getting closer." "We need to move," reluctantly, Ethan nodded. Together they melted back into the shadows, leaving no trace of their presence. But as they retreated, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The artifact was awakening something in the humans, something primal and unpredictable. And deep down, he wondered if they were ready for what came next. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting Pine Ridge in a blanket of darkness. The forest, once alive with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves, now felt eerily silent. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Ethan and Rachel moved cautiously through the shadows, their footsteps barely making a sound. They were deep in thought, replaying the events of the day and trying to decide their next move. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't stop thinking about the humans, Daniel and Clara, especially. Their determination to investigate the disturbances intrigued him. Most species would have fled or ignored such strange occurrences, but not these humans. They faced the unknown head-on, driven by curiosity and a need to understand. Ethan admired that, though he knew it could also be dangerous. If they kept digging, they might uncover more than Ethan wanted them to. Rachel, on the other hand, was growing increasingly uneasy. "We should leave," she whispered as they reached a secluded clearing. "Every moment we stay here puts us at risk." "You saw how close they came today." Ethan shook his head. "No, this is our chance to learn. Humanity's instincts are being awakened, don't you see? The artifact is amplifying their behavior, showing us what they're truly capable of. That's exactly why we should go," Rachel hissed. "You don't know what will happen if this continues. What if they turn on each other? Or worse, what if they figure out we're here?" "They won't," Ethan said firmly, though even he wasn't entirely sure. "We'll keep our distance, but we can't abandon the mission now. Not when we're so close to answers." Rachel sighed in frustration, but didn't argue further. She trusted Ethan even if she didn't always agree with him. For now, she would stay and help, but she made a mental note to keep a closer eye on things. If the situation spiraled out of control, she wouldn't hesitate to intervene. Meanwhile, back in town, Daniel and Clara were poring over maps and notes in the sheriff's office. The room was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a desk lamp and the glow of Clara's laptop screen. They had spent hours going over the reports, piecing together clues about the strange happenings in the forest. Despite their efforts, they still didn't have a clear explanation. "This doesn't make sense," Clara muttered, rubbing her temples. "The animal behavior, the lights in the sky, the energy readings, it's like something is messing with the environment. But what could cause all of this?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Could it be some kind of military experiment? Or maybe a weather phenomenon? Clara shook her head. I've ruled both of those out. Whatever this is, it's not natural, and it's definitely not human-made. Daniel frowned. Then what are we dealing with? Before Clara could respond, there was a knock at the door. Kyle Jenkins, a local mechanic and part-time volunteer firefighter, stepped inside. His face was flushed and he looked agitated. Sheriff, you need to come quick. There's been another sighting. What kind of sighting? Daniel asked, standing up. Lights again? But this time people say they saw shapes. Moving. In the woods, big ones. Daniel exchanged a glance with Clara. Let's check it out. The three of them headed to the edge of the forest, where a small crowd had gathered. Residents pointed toward the trees, whispering nervously about what they'd seen. Some claimed they'd spotted glowing figures darting between the trunks, while others swore they heard strange noises, low hums, and clicks that didn't sound like any animal they knew. Clara scanned the area with a handheld device, her brow furrowing as the readings spiked. There's definitely something here. High levels of electromagnetic activity. Daniel turned to the crowd. All right, everyone, go home. We'll take care of this. Most of the townsfolk hesitated but eventually dispersed, leaving Daniel, Clara, and Kyle alone. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew colder and an unsettling feeling settled over them. Every step seemed to echo louder than it should, and the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. Suddenly, Kyle stopped. Did you hear that? They froze, listening intently. At first there was nothing. Then a faint buzzing noise filled the air, growing louder by the second. A beam of light shot down from the sky, illuminating a patch of ground just ahead. Instinctively, Kyle raised his rifle and fired a shot into the trees. No, Clara shouted, grabbing his arm. What are you doing? I'm not taking chances, Kyle snapped. Whatever's out there isn't human. Before anyone could react, the light flickered and changed. A holographic image appeared, a towering, insect-like creature with multiple legs and glowing eyes. It hovered silently, its presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. The humans stared in shock, unsure of what to do next. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the image vanished. The forest fell silent once more, leaving Daniel, Clara, and Kyle standing in stunned disbelief. What was that? Kyle stammered, lowering his rifle. Clara shook her head. I don't know, but it wasn't just a trick of the light. Daniel clenched his fists. We need to find out who or what is behind this. Unbeknownst to them, Ethan and Rachel watched from a safe distance. They had activated the hologram as a last resort, hoping to scare the humans away without revealing themselves fully. But instead of retreating, the humans seemed more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Rachel crossed her arms. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Now they'll never stop looking. Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Let them chase the mystery. It'll show us what they're really made of. Rachel gave him a sharp look. And what happens when they catch us? We'll deal with that if it comes, Ethan replied. For now, let's see how far they're willing to go. Over the next few days, tensions in Pine Ridge continued to rise. More sightings were reported, and the artifact's influence grew stronger. Animals became increasingly aggressive, attacking livestock and even venturing into town. Electrical systems failed sporadically, plunging parts of the community into darkness. Fear spread like wildfire, and whispers of alien invaders began to circulate. Daniel and Clara worked tirelessly to maintain order, but it was becoming harder. Even Kyle, usually level-headed, seemed to be losing his patience. We can't just sit around and wait for them to strike again, he argued during one meeting. We need to fight back. Fight who? Daniel countered. We don't even know what we're dealing with. It doesn't matter, Kyle insisted. If they're watching us, then we're sitting ducks. We need to take the fight to them. Clara stepped in before the argument escalated. Fighting blindly won't solve anything. We need evidence, not panic. Despite her words, the mood in town remained tense. Groups of residents began organizing themselves into patrols, armed with whatever weapons they could find. Some claimed they were protecting their families. While others admitted they wanted revenge for the chaos wreaked on their lives, Ethan observed all of this with a mixture five of fascination and concern. The humans were adapting quickly, forming alliances and strategies despite the fear gripping their community. They were resourceful, resilient, and driven by a mix of emotions, anger, protectiveness, and determination. It was everything Ethan had hoped to witness, yet it also worried him. How far would they go? Would they cross the line from hunters to hunted? Rachel, meanwhile, focused on damage control. She monitored the artifact's effects closely, ensuring it didn't spiral completely out of control. If this keeps up, the entire town could descend into chaos, she warned Ethan one evening. Is this really worth it? Yes, Ethan replied without hesitation. Because now we're seeing humanity at its core. Stripped of comfort and certainty, they reveal their true nature. And that's what we came here to understand. Rachel didn't respond. She simply stared at the distant lights of Pine Ridge, wondering if Ethan's curiosity would lead them to answers or disaster. As the days passed, the line between predator and prey blurred. The humans hunted for answers, unaware that they were being studied in return. Each side was driven by instinct, yet neither fully understood the other. In the quiet moments between tension and conflict, Pine Ridge held its breath, waiting to see which side would emerge victorious or if either could truly win at all. The days in Pine Ridge had grown shorter, the nights colder. The once peaceful town now buzzed with restless energy, as if every resident was waiting for something to happen. The strange events in the forest had only intensified, and the artifact, buried beneath the ground, continued to pulse with unseen power. Ethan and Rachel watched from the shadows, their presence carefully concealed but their influence undeniable. They had pushed humanity to its limits, and now they were about to see just how far people would go. Ethan stood on a hill overlooking the town, his sharp eyes scanning the streets below. Groups of armed townsfolk patrolled the area, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Some carried rifles, others makeshift weapons like baseball bats or knives. Their faces were tense, their movements cautious but determined. Ethan felt a mix of pride and unease. These humans were resourceful, yes, but they were also unpredictable. He wondered if they realized the danger they were stepping into, or if they even cared. Rachel approached him silently, her expression grim. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "The artifact's energy is spreading faster than we anticipated. If we don't do something soon, it could escalate beyond our control." "We're close to an answer," Ethan replied without looking at her. "The humans are showing us exactly what we came here to see. They're adapting, strategizing, and preparing to fight. Isn't that what we wanted?" "At what cost?" Rachel shot back. "You're playing with fire, Ethan. What happens when they figure out we're behind this? Or worse, what happens if they turn on each other?" "They won't," Ethan said firmly, though there was a flicker of doubt in his voice. "Humans thrive under pressure. They find strength in chaos. That's why they're different." Rachel sighed, shaking her head. She wanted to argue further, but she knew it wouldn't change his mind. Instead, she focused on the task at hand. "Fine, but we need to be ready for anything. If things spiral out of control, we might have to intervene." Ethan nodded. "Agreed." Back in town, Daniel and Clara were trying to keep the situation from escalating further. The sheriff's office had become a makeshift command center, filled with maps, notes, and equipment borrowed from Clara's lab. Residents came and went, sharing reports of strange sightings and incidents. Some claimed to have seen glowing figures in the woods, while others reported hearing eerie sounds that seemed to come from nowhere. The fear in their voices was palpable. Clara sat at the table, reviewing data on her laptop. Her face was pale, her eyes tired from lack of sleep. "The readings are off the charts," she muttered. "Whatever's causing this, it's not slowing down." Daniel leaned over her shoulder, studying the screen. "Do you think it's some kind of alien technology?" "It has to be," Clara replied. "There's no other explanation. But the question is, why are they here, and what do they want?" Before Daniel could respond, Kyle burst into the room. His face was flushed, and he looked agitated. "We found something," he said breathlessly. Out by the old mill, tracks big ones, and they're fresh. Daniel and Clara exchanged a glance. Let's check it out, Daniel said, grabbing his flashlight. The three of them hurried to the outskirts of town where a group of residents had gathered near the abandoned mill. The air was thick with tension, and the faint smell of damp earth filled their nostrils. In the dirt, they found deep imprints too large to belong to any known animal. The tracks led straight into the forest. This isn't natural, Clara whispered, crouching down to examine the prints. These aren't from any creature I've ever seen. Then what are they? Kyle asked, gripping his rifle tightly. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for everyone to follow him as he stepped into the trees. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife replaced by an oppressive stillness. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the unknown pressed down on them. As they ventured deeper, the temperature dropped noticeably. Their breaths formed clouds in the air, and the beams of their flashlights revealed strange marks on the trees. Long scratches that glowed faintly in the dark. Clara stopped, abruptly, her eyes widening. Look at this, she said, pointing to a patch of ground covered in metallic shards. This isn't from Earth. Before anyone could react, a low hum filled the air. It started softly, almost imperceptible, but quickly grew louder, vibrating through their chests. The trees around them seemed to shimmer, their outlines blurring as if reality itself was bending. Then, without warning, a holographic projection appeared, a towering, insect-like creature with multiple legs and glowing eyes. It moved slowly, its presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. Kyle raised his rifle and fired instinctively. The bullet passed harmlessly through the image, which flickered before vanishing completely. The forest fell silent once more, leaving the group standing in stunned disbelief. What the hell was that? Kyle demanded, his voice trembling. I don't know, Daniel admitted, lowering his flashlight, but it wasn't trying to hurt us. It was just, watching. Clara nodded slowly. It's like they're testing us, seeing how we react. Testing. US? Kyle repeated incredulously. Why would aliens care about us? Because we're different, Clara said quietly. We hunt predators, we adapt. Maybe they're curious about why. While the humans tried to make sense of what they'd seen, Ethan and Rachel observed from a safe distance. They had activated the hologram again, deliberately provoking the humans to see how they would respond. Ethan felt a surge of admiration as he watched Daniel and Clara remain calm despite the chaos around them. Even Kyle, though quick to react violently, showed signs of restraint after realizing the projection wasn't a threat. They're learning, Ethan murmured. Every interaction teaches them something new, and every move we make brings us closer to disaster, Rachel countered. If they connect the dots, if they realize we're manipulating them, it'll end badly for everyone. Ethan didn't respond. He knew Rachel was right, but he couldn't bring himself to stop. This was the closest they'd ever come to understanding humanity's unique nature. For the first time, he began to wonder if their mission was worth the risk, not just for the Valens, but for the humans themselves. Back in town, tensions continued to rise. The patrols grew larger, and the mood among the residents shifted from fear to anger. Many believed the mysterious lights and creatures were signs of an impending attack. Kyle became increasingly vocal, urging the townsfolk to take a stand. We can't wait for them to come to us, he argued during one meeting. We need to find them and stop them before it's too late. Daniel tried to reason with him. We don't even know who or what we're dealing with. Charging in blind will only get people hurt. Better to act than sit around and do nothing, Kyle snapped. If you won't lead, then I will. Clara stepped in before the argument escalated. Fighting isn't the answer. We need to think carefully about our next move. Despite her words, the divide between the residents grew wider. Some sided with Kyle, eager to confront the unknown threat, while others listened to Daniel and Clara's calls for caution. The town teetered on the edge of chaos, held together only by the thinnest thread of trust. That night, Ethan decided to push the boundaries even further. Using the artifact, he amplified its effects, targeting specific areas of the town. Animals became more aggressive, attacking livestock and wandering into streets. Electrical systems failed entirely, plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness. The goal was simple: force the humans to adapt, to show their true instincts under extreme pressure. Rachel watched in silence, her arms crossed tightly. "You're playing a dangerous game," she said. "What happens when they snap?" "They won't," Ethan replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "They're stronger than that." Rachel didn't argue. Instead, she turned her attention to the humans, observing their reactions. To her surprise, many of them rose to the challenge. Neighbors helped each other, forming tight-knit groups to protect their homes. Even those who disagreed on how to handle the situation worked together when it mattered most. There was fear, yes, but also resilience, a determination to survive no matter the odds. By morning, the town was a hive of activity. Daniel and Clara led efforts to restore order, directing patrols and coordinating supplies. Kyle and his followers remained on edge, itching for a confrontation. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. Their nerves stretched thin. Unbeknownst to them, Ethan and Rachel were preparing for the final phase of their mission. The artifact's energy was reaching its peak, and the humans' instincts were fully awakened. Now, it was time to see whether humanity's drive to hunt would reveal courage or destruction. The tension in Pine Ridge reached a breaking point. The town, once quiet and peaceful, now felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. Every corner of the community was touched by fear and uncertainty. Strange occurrences had become the norm: animals acting violently, lights flickering unpredictably, and eerie sounds echoing through the forest. The residents were divided, their trust in each other fraying under the weight of the unknown. Ethan and Rachel watched it all unfold from the shadows. They had pushed humanity to its limits, using the artifact to amplify primal instincts and provoke reactions. Ethan's curiosity had driven them this far, but even he couldn't ignore the growing unease in Rachel's eyes. She stood beside him on a hill overlooking the town, her arms crossed tightly as she scanned the chaos below. "This is it," Ethan said quietly. "We're about to see what happens when humans are pushed to their breaking point. And if they break?" Rachel asked sharply. "What then? Do we step in and clean up the mess?" "We won't need to," Ethan replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "They're stronger than you think," Rachel shook her head. "You keep saying that, but I don't see how you can be so sure. What if they turn on each other? Or worse, what if they turn on us?" "They won't," Ethan insisted, though deep down he wasn't entirely certain. He had seen glimpses of humanity's resilience, the way they banded together despite their differences, the way they adapted to impossible situations, but he also knew how fragile that unity could be. Fear had a way of unraveling even the strongest bonds. Back in town, Daniel and Clara worked tirelessly to keep the peace. The sheriff's office was crowded with worried residents, some demanding answers, others seeking protection. Kyle and his followers had grown more vocal, urging immediate action against the mysterious threat lurking in the woods. Daniel tried to calm everyone down, but his patience was wearing thin. "We can't just charge into the forest blind," he said firmly, addressing the group. "We don't know what we're dealing with. If we act recklessly, people will get hurt." "Doing nothing is just as dangerous," Kyle shot back. "Every day we wait, things get worse. We need to fight back." Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Fighting without understanding the enemy is a mistake. Look at the evidence. We've seen strange lights, holograms, and energy readings unlike anything on Earth. This isn't something we can handle alone." "What do you suggest, then?" Kyle demanded. "Sit around and hope they leave us alone?" "No," Clara replied. But we need to be smart about this. If we rush in, we might trigger something we can't stop." Her words did little to ease the anger in the room. The divide between those who wanted to act and those who favored caution grew wider with every passing hour. Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before someone made a move, whether he agreed with it or not. That night, the artifact's influence reached its peak. Animals roamed freely through the streets, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Electrical systems failed entirely, plunging the town into complete darkness. The air hummed with an unnatural energy, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate faintly. It was as if the artifact was alive, feeding off the fear and chaos it had created. Ethan and Rachel stood at the edge of the forest, watching the town descend further into disorder. The Valen technology they carried allowed them to remain unseen, but even invisibility couldn't shield them from the rising tension. Rachel turned to Ethan, her expression grim. "This is your plan?" she asked. "Letting the humans tear themselves apart while we watch." "It's not tearing apart," Ethan replied. "It's testing their limits. Humanity's ability to adapt is what makes them unique. We're seeing that firsthand." "At what cost?" Rachel snapped. "Look at them. They're scared, angry, and ready to lash out at anything or anyone they think is responsible." Before Ethan could respond, a commotion erupted near the center of town. A group of armed residents led by Kyle stormed toward the forest, determined to confront whatever was causing the disturbances. Daniel and Clara followed close behind, trying to reason with them. "Stop," Daniel shouted as they reached the tree line. "You're walking straight into danger." "We're tired of waiting," Kyle growled. "If there's something out there, we'll find it." Clara stepped forward, holding up her hands. "Please listen to us. We don't know what we're dealing with. Rushing in blindly could make things worse." Kyle ignored her, motioning for his group to press on. Reluctantly, Daniel and Clara joined them, unwilling to let the others face the unknown alone. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees loomed ominously, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. Every sound seemed amplified, echoing unnaturally through the stillness. Ethan and Rachel shadowed the group, staying just out of sight. They watched as the humans moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The artifact's energy pulsed stronger here, creating an almost tangible presence in the air. Ethan felt a pang of admiration as he observed their determination. Even in the face of overwhelming fear, they refused to back down. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A low, guttural hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The humans froze, their flashlights sweeping across the trees as they searched for the source of the noise. Then, without warning, the artifact activated fully, unleashing a burst of light that illuminated the entire forest. The humans shielded their eyes, momentarily blinded by the intensity. When the light faded, they found themselves surrounded by holographic projections, dozens of towering insect-like creatures that moved silently among the trees. Their glowing eyes locked onto the humans, studying them with cold detachment. Kyle raised his rifle and fired instinctively. The bullet passed harmlessly through one of the projections, which flickered but remained intact. The creatures didn't attack. Instead, they simply watched, their movements deliberate and calculated. "What are they doing?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "They're testing us," Daniel replied, lowering his flashlight. "Seeing how we react." As the projections circled the group, panic began to set in. Some of the residents screamed, while others fired their weapons wildly. Kyle shouted orders, trying to maintain control, but the situation was spiraling out of hand. Ethan watched intently, his mind racing. The humans' responses were exactly what he had hoped to observe, a mix of fear, aggression, and determination. But as the chaos unfolded, he realized the stakes were higher than he'd anticipated. These weren't just experiments. Lives were at risk. Rachel grabbed his arm. "We have to stop this, now." Ethan hesitated, torn between his mission and the consequences of continuing. Finally, he nodded. "All right, let's end it." Together, they activated a countermeasure, sending out a signal that disrupted the artifact's energy field. The projections vanished instantly, leaving the forest eerily silent. The trembling ground stilled, and the oppressive energy dissipated. For a moment, no one moved. Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Whoever you are, show yourselves." Ethan and Rachel exchanged a glance before stepping into view. Their camouflage dissolved, revealing their true forms, tall, slender beings with smooth, iridescent skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. Gasps rippled through the group as they took in the sight of the aliens. "You're real," Clara murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "We mean no harm," Ethan said, his voice calm and measured. "We came to observe, not to hurt." "Observe what?" Daniel demanded, his hand resting on his holster. "Why are you messing with our town?" "To understand you," Rachel replied. "Your species is unique. You hunt predators, face danger willingly, and adapt to survive. We wanted to know why." "And you thought scaring us half to death was the best way to find out?" Kyle spat, raising his rifle again. Ethan held up a hand. "It was never our intention to cause harm. The artifact amplified your instincts, showing us how you respond under pressure, but we underestimated the consequences." Clara stepped closer, her curiosity outweighing her fear. "Why does it matter so much to you? Why study us at all?" "Because we were once prey," Ethan explained. "Long ago, our species faced extinction at the hands of a predator. We evolved to avoid conflict, to prioritize safety above all. Else, humans are different. You embrace risk, even thrive on it. That fascinates us." Daniel lowered his weapon slightly, though his expression remained wary. "So what happens now?" "Are you leaving?" "Yes," Rachel answered quickly. "Our mission is over. We've learned what we needed to." As Ethan and Rachel prepared to depart, Clara spoke up. "Will you tell others about us? About humanity?" Ethan paused, considering her question. "Perhaps. But for now, we'll leave you in peace." With that, the two Valens disappeared into the shadows, their forms fading from view. The humans stood in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. The artifact's energy had faded completely, leaving the forest quiet once more. Back in town, life slowly began to return to normal. The strange occurrences ceased, and the residents worked together to rebuild trust and restore order. Though shaken, they emerged stronger, united by the shared experience of facing the unknown. For Daniel and Clara, the encounter left a lasting impression. They couldn't explain everything they had witnessed, but they knew one thing for certain: humanity's capacity for courage and resilience was a defining trait. The sun rose over Pine Ridge, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and pink. For the first time in days, the town felt calm. The strange disturbances that had gripped the community were gone, replaced by an almost eerie stillness. Birds chirped timidly, as if testing whether it was safe to return. The residents emerged from their homes cautiously, exchanging quiet greetings and glances filled with relief and lingering unease. Ethan and Rachel stood on a hill overlooking the town, their ship hovering silently behind them. They were preparing to leave Earth, but neither of them felt entirely at peace. The mission had been a success in many ways. They had observed humanity's instincts, witnessed their resilience, and uncovered answers about why this species hunted predators, but the experience had left its mark on both of them. Rachel broke the silence first. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Ethan hesitated before answering. "I think we learned what we came for, but I also think we pushed them too far." Rachel nodded slowly. "They could have turned on each other? Or worse, they might have discovered more about us than we wanted them to." "They didn't," Ethan replied. "And that's a testament to who they are. Even when fear and chaos surrounded them, they found ways to work together. They adapted just like we knew they would. But at what cost?" Rachel pressed. "Fear can bring people together, yes, but it can also tear them apart. What if our presence caused lasting damage?" Ethan sighed, his gaze fixed on the distant rooftops of Pine Ridge. "We'll never know for sure. All we can do now is report back to the council and let them decide what comes next." Rachel didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her attention to the humans below. She thought about Daniel and Clara, their determination to protect their community, their refusal to give in to panic. She thought about Kyle and his followers, driven by anger but ultimately willing to listen when it mattered most. And she thought about the countless others who had faced the unknown with courage, even when they were terrified. "Maybe there's hope for them," Rachel said finally, her tone lighter than before. "They're not perfect, but they're remarkable." "Ethan," smiled faintly. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you. Back in town, Daniel and Clara sat on the steps of the sheriff's office, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. Neither of them had slept much, but exhaustion was outweighed by the need to process everything that had happened. The memory of the Valens, those tall, otherworldly beings, was still fresh in their minds. What do you think they'll do now? Clara asked, breaking the silence. Daniel shrugged. Hard to say. They seemed sincere when they said they'd leave us. Alone. But who knows, maybe we'll hear from them again someday. Clara nodded thoughtfully. Do you think anyone will believe us if we tell them what really happened? Daniel chuckled dryly. Probably not. Most folks around here will chalk it up to stress or bad weather. And honestly, maybe that's for the best. You don't want to share the truth? Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. It's not about wanting to or not, Daniel replied. It's about knowing when to let things be. People are scared enough as it is. Telling them aliens were watching us might do more harm than good. Clara leaned back, staring at the horizon. Still, it feels strange, doesn't it, knowing we're not alone out there? Yeah, Daniel agreed. But maybe that's a good thing. If those aliens are anything like us, if they're curious, adaptable, maybe even a little scared, then maybe we're not so different after all. Kyle stood near the edge of the forest, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He hadn't joined the others in celebrating the return to normalcy. Instead, he spent the morning pacing, replaying the events of the past few days in his mind. The sight of the Valens haunted him, not because they were terrifying, but because they reminded him of how small and powerless he truly was. For years, Kyle had prided himself on being prepared for anything. He kept his tools sharp, his truck running smoothly, and his home stocked with supplies. But none of that had mattered when the lights went out and the ground shook. In those moments, he had felt completely out of control. As he stared into the trees, Kyle realized something important. Strength wasn't just about fighting. It was about enduring, about finding ways to keep going even when everything seemed hopeless. And while he still didn't trust the idea of leaving the town undefended, he understood now that some battles couldn't be won with weapons. With a deep breath, Kyle turned away from the forest and headed back toward town. There was work to be done, fences to mend, livestock to tend to, neighbors to check on. Life wouldn't wait for him to figure everything out. And maybe that was okay. In the days that followed, Pine Ridge began to heal. The patrols disbanded, and the makeshift command center in the sheriff's office returned to its usual quiet state. Residents resumed their routines, though conversations often drifted back to the strange events. Some joked about it, using humor to cope with lingering fears. Others spoke seriously, speculating about what might have caused the disturbances. Daniel and Clara became unofficial leaders during this time, helping to rebuild trust and address concerns. They organized community meetings, encouraged open dialogue, and worked tirelessly to ensure everyone felt safe again. Slowly but surely, the divisions between groups began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of unity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara found herself standing outside the forest where it had all begun. She carried a flashlight, though she didn't turn it on. The darkness felt less intimidating now. Somehow familiar rather than frightening. She knelt down and brushed her fingers against the ground, feeling the rough texture of dirt and leaves. Despite everything that had happened, she couldn't help but feel grateful. The crisis had exposed flaws in the town's foundation, yes, but it had also revealed strengths she hadn't known existed. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it was resilient, and that gave her hope. High above Earth, Ethan and Rachel's ship drifted through the stars. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly around them, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of Pine Ridge. Inside the vessel, the two Valens sat in silence, reflecting on their journey. Do you think the council will agree with us? Rachel asked eventually. Ethan glanced at her. About what? About humanity, about giving them a chance. Ethan smiled faintly. I think they'll see what we saw, that humans aren't just hunters. They're survivors, protectors, maybe not always wise, but always determined. Rachel nodded, a hint of warmth returning to her expression. Let's hope so. Because if anyone can change the galaxy, it's them. As the ship continued its journey, the image of Pine Ridge lingered in their minds, a reminder of the courage, compassion, and complexity of the human spirit. Though uncertain about the future, both Ethan and Rachel felt a newfound respect for the species they had studied. Perhaps, they thought, humanity's greatest strength wasn't its ability to hunt predators, but its capacity to face the unknown and emerge stronger for it. And somewhere, deep within the universe, the story of Pine Ridge quietly echoed, waiting for the day when humanity's path might cross with others once more.